You like to get pretty fiery online.
While all the other companies may yell at you and claim to sell you something like, this is perfect GTO, they just complete ludicrous nonsense, basically.
That's pretty fucking preposterous to be able to claim that.
Well, congratulations, you've just learned nothing.
This is my second ever episode of the Epiphany podcast, and I'm very happy that I get to share it with somebody in the poker world with whom I have great respect for, but also with whom I have many disagreements. And I assume there are going to be there within poker, at least. I don't know what your personal opinion.
Personally, I was going to say there will be less than the audience would expect.
Nah,
there might be some, but I think there will be less than the people expect.
For these adrenaline junkies.
I'm just boring.
Dude, you're anything but boring. I guess we can start with the strategy that you seem to execute on the Twitter streets, and just to kind of initiate the conversation. It seems to me like you have put a lot of time and effort into your company. Is that you understand Sims to such a great level that it really annoys you when you see other companies that haven't put as much time and effort into their Sims, into their game theory solutions for poker. And you like to get pretty fiery online. So do you want to kind of introduce what's happening there?
That does seem pretty fair, yeah. I mean, I'm not like trying to just, quote unquote, shit on people because that benefits me. It's just like one of these things where Sims specifically, like you could just rush them and get an output, okay? Then it's not going to be beneficial to anyone. But you could like slap a price tag on it. You can say, this is like so much better than Hio Solver. This is better than simple preflop. This is better than what Dom's built. Or I guess in that case, actually, people come out and say, this is better than DTO because of X. And I personally don't think this is fair, because if you rush to get to this output, you are providing lower quality, So it does get quite personal when they say like, we are better than DTO because of X. And then I just be like, wait, hang on a minute. If they are better than us, then I know how much time and resources go into building something better. Let's check if they actually did that, because I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it because the expenses for that are so high. So I think we should all hold ourselves to like a minimum amount of like quality when we bring out poker strategy, personally, because it quite frankly isn't fair to the ones who do put in the work, because then like they, it's like it's money and resources and like everything else that in this instance we put in doesn't really feel worth it, because someone just comes in and cuts corners, does it cheaper, and then you're like, hang on a minute, how can they do this?
And I resonate with that in the sense of, I think that if you're selling a product, I'm very, very vehement that you have to be completely honest with what you're selling. And in something like poker, it's so huge. You're not just selling like some kind of random product they're going to use once. This is setting up an education for somebody's entire career. So if you learn something wrong early on, and under the impression that you've learned something that is a God-given right by the GTO gods, then that could just screw with your whole life. I mean, you could lose financial independence because of it, and it's not stretching to say that it could really destroy people.
Charlie, it's not just this. It's like the slogan that basically goes, "You never have to use a solver again," which is ridiculous. This tool doesn't replace a solver, right? So I have a lot of issues with, in general, like marketing that's just completely made up. For example, you will never hear me say that like DTO is like true GTO or whatever. We don't do any of this. We're just extremely honest in our approach. And I would personally like to hold other companies to the same standard for that very reason, that it's not a joke. People rely on this, as you put it. They make a living playing poker. You can't just sell them a tool that says like, oh yeah, actually your check was fine. You can check this, it's fine. When actually the reason it says it's fine is because you didn't do your work properly. It's just not okay, in my opinion.
No, I'm absolutely with you there. And coming from the position, I'm in the high stakes poker community, I have some level of understanding, but I'm really distanced away from all of these GTO things. Just to clarify, I'm not a big fan of calling specific people out, but you can definitely, in my opinion, call specific companies out and say, this is what I think this company is doing very, very wrong. And if somebody happens to be attached to that, well, that's their prerogative that they put themselves out there. So your company is DTO. Do you want to just give us this maybe a bang bang, but maybe just a more
Right.
concise version of why you believe that DTO would be more, more valuable to somebody to learn game theory approach to poker than something like
It's
Odin would be.
uh, it's very much about what we believe is in teaching efficient sims. So like you gotta look at, well, first of all, now it's become quite clear that our accuracy is much higher than the other ones used. I didn't know this personally. I had an assumption. I couldn't prove it. Now I know. Um, the thing with DTO is like we try to teach one strategy that is simplified. So while all the other companies may yell at you and claim to sell you something like this is perfect GTO, I personally believe that this is just made up nonsense. True full GTO. We don't know this. We only know the solution to sub games. So, so the best approach is to, as accurately as possible, solve a small sub game, and then you can learn a strategy and you can use that and apply that to the real game of poker as well. So that's what we do. And then all these other tools are basically trying for something that's like such a massive task that there's no way they could take it on. Like obviously you can't. The game is too complex. What you're trying to do. What you should do instead is like make it simple and then carry that over. But we just try to be more simple, and yeah, it's a different track.
So just to define some terms for people who probably won't understand what the crap we're talking about. So when we're talking about GTO, we're talking about game theory optimal, and that's let's say if you're playing rock paper scissors is the classic example. The game theory optimal approach would be to throw rock paper and scissors at 33.333% frequency, and you'd have to randomize between all three of them, so your strategy becomes completely unexploitable. And also in the poker context, what you're trying to do is create a strategy that's maximizing your expected value, maximizing the amount of money you'd make if you played the situation infinite, or all the situations infinite times. So you're saying that you can't solve GTO in poker, and I at least with the technology that we have now, it seems pretty fucking preposterous to be able to claim that. And the reason for that, I imagine, is because there are so many different trees. There are so many different bet sizes that you can use. You know, you can bet 100, 101, 102, and how the fuck you meant to solve that? So what you're saying is that you need to simplify it and make smaller sub games and use fewer bet sizes. And
yes,
so
absolutely.
Yeah.
An easy way to look at this is, let's say we can look at a sub game of only betting 33% on the flop. Okay, that's a strategy people employ. That is fine. You could also look at a sub game that bets 33% and 100%, or you can look at a sub game that bets 100% and then checks. All of these are valid strategies. But what people don't get in like this whole GTO madness is that they think they can get an all-in-one solution. They think they can build one simulation that models all the sizings for them, when that really isn't the case. Like the only way to logically work your way through this is to solve for a strategy that you wanted to play. So you can't say like, here's 10 sizings, play this strategy. I mean, you can, but the output doesn't give you anything, right? But like for a human, you can be like, okay, now give me a 33% strategy only. I will, and then you can study from that and use that. So it's much more about being smart with the solver rather than trying to think the solver gives you like the perfect answer to everything. You need to be smart about it. And if you're not smart about it, you will get stuck and frustrated.
Yeah, and I noticed that actually. I'd say maybe it's beginning about 6 to 7 years ago when I was playing the high stakes community. People got pretty bad at poker really quickly for a short period of time, maybe for a year or so, because everyone was trying to use game theory, and everyone was doing it really fucking wrong.
I can give you a funny example.
Me too, but you after you.
All right. Personally, like a lot of like the real madness of all of this began when we first got our access on solvers, and a bunch of people were trying to figure out if they should bet 40 or 60% on the flop. Like just complete ludicrous nonsense, basically. I've seen like some spreadsheets build and be like, okay, here look 50%. You know, like this is better here, and this is like complete nonsense, completely like misapplying the product like for a year or something. You know, like. Yeah. But it makes sense also because these things, you know, you give them to a poker player doesn't know what the hell to do with this. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we kind of got tools that were so powerful that at first nobody really understood them. And I've never used the solver myself. I've seen other people use them, and I've spoken to people that have used them, and I've learned from them by proxy through the conduit of other brains. But I got a front row seat of when people were really first trying to work it out, and I remember I was working with Ben Heath, whom you've played against a lot, and he's very, very good at poker, very smart. And we're both just we realized it's like we have to come up with an anti-GTO strategy here. And it's not that we thought that GTO was exploitable. You know, we're both very mathematically minded, but we both saw how other people were using it. And an hilarious example is like people were so at first so obsessed with the concept of blockers that our anti-GTO strategy would be whenever we get a value hand in a spot where it seems like they might have top pair or like a blocker to a straight or something, we just 6x pot the river for value. And the amount of calls that we would get when someone's like, I've got a jack, what am I meant to do, man? I got the blocker. Where in actuality, what you're meant to do is probably call that hand like 4% of the time or something like that.
That's by the way, the funny thing that you say 4%, because that's another thing that like drives me crazy when I see people use a solver. They get an output and they say something. It's like, you're supposed to do this 4% of the time. And then they like, okay, well, I did call it 100% of the time, but the solver says it was okay. No, it's not. It's like stuff like this that I think a good way to sum this up is like people just misapply what they get out of the solver, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault. You know, you're a poker player. You don't know how to deal with the information that's in front of you, and that's exactly what you said. People just misapply. You know, people just will just be like the blockers, and then they just be like, I have to call now, and no, you don't. Quite frankly, and yeah, in that instance, I 100% agree.
So, in your opinion, if we were to look at the high stakes poker community as they're playing now in say high stakes tournaments, not so much online cash, but maybe live cash as well, how good to bad do you think people are in comparison to, you know, if they were 10 years down the line extra familiar with the GTO concepts, or 100 years down the line? Do you think that there's still loads of room for improvement, or do you think we've kind of negotiated our way towards some kind of optimal?
I think there's loads of room for improvement. There's many things that you can do with solvers that, to my knowledge, no one does. You can play completely different strategies to people and do just well doing that. I think though you can see that like people play really, really well already for the most part. You know, people randomize, and the fact that people randomize is already quite dangerous for your win rate, because it used to be a lot easier when people would do everything just 100% of the time, because that way they were easy to exploit. You know, you'd have a dead on read on people. But nowadays you don't know if someone does it like 25% or just yeah, all the time, and that's always a huge difference. I think high stakes, the good players are incredibly good. Yeah, obviously they're gonna get better, but they're gonna get better in a different way than we'd expect. I think right now, when you watch someone play a hand, or you watch someone play a final table, from a theory perspective, I don't see them making like huge mistakes. You'll see like the occasional guy misapply a concept here and there, but yeah, everyone's just gonna get better. And I think in 10 years, I think maybe poker's gonna look very different actually, because I think people are gonna go with different strategies. They might go back to raising bigger, might employ a limping strategy. Who knows? I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm super excited for it as well. And it's one of the things that at first it was a mixed bag for me when I saw the rise of GTO in poker. First of all, it was exciting because things were changing. And for somebody who's very much into live tells, it was very exciting because people trying to like fake check clocks to randomize and things like that was just amazing. Actually, I have this one hand history that always brings a smile to my face. And it was one of my, it was actually Ben's hand history. And he was playing against Ike Axton. And he has like third pair against Ike on the turn after checking back flop. He bets small. And Ike genuinely randomizes, and after he randomizes looks really fucking nervous. As soon as he randomizes, starts looking really nervous. He just like 4x raises the turn, check raise 4x raises the turn, and then like 2x pot shoves the river as a bluff. Ben just snaps off with fourth pair, and Ike's just like, I don't think that's a call.
Yeah, I,
So it was nice from a library perspective, but there was a part of me that was kind of sad because I wasn't sure. I was like, maybe poker's about to get solved. Maybe I because I didn't understand game theory, nor did anyone at first. But it's exciting to hear you say that. It's exciting for me to see that there are tons of people making tons of mistakes, and there are so many different strategies that haven't been worked out. Do you feel like you and I don't know, whoever you speak poker with, and maybe the people you've made your software with, have you been pioneering any different kind of strategies within the poker world?
uh, no, and that's pretty much on purpose. I think if you look at the way people play the game, they all sort of like play the same ranges pre-flop. Would you they got their
Yeah.
ranges from somewhere?
I'm
Maybe
not
they
going to
got
include myself in that if that's okay, but yeah.
fair enough. Yeah, not necessarily wouldn't necessarily include myself either, but so basically you have like everyone starting from the same point, and the idea was that we could then build a software on top of that that would make learning like that kind of game much easier. And so it's less about pioneering, and it's much more about making the process of getting better. Making the process of getting better. Like you can learn much more efficiently now, and but I don't want to claim that like we invented something, because that was not the intention there. We could in theory, like with preflop solvers, we could build like a bunch of alternative strategies and stuff, and this is something we will explore in the future. But for now, I don't think that's necessary, right? For now, we still it's the learning curve with solvers, basically, where we started out pretty bad. Poker players start out pretty bad, and then we're gradually getting better. And as we get better as poker players, I think the demand for higher quality strategy will increase as well, and that will force us to build something new and innovative in that way. But right now, I don't think we should innovate. I think actually, if you ask me this way, like we've done a little bit of innovating with the limping strategies, but honestly, that was purely selfish. That's because I wanted it, because I like to limp a lot. So
You
I
were, you
wanted
were
to,
one of the only people utilizing a limping strategy when I was playing in the high stakes. Like one
uh,
of the only people in a tournament.
yeah, exactly, right. So that's why we put that in there. I personally still think, uh, from a financial perspective, that was a mistake to include that in DTO. I don't think anyone really uses it that much. Um, I just built it in because I wanted it and I use it. But if you look at, I personally think limping is really good, and I still don't think it has caught on. It has caught on of short stakes with a lot of people, but not everyone. Um, yeah, I don't think we needed it in there. I think in that way you could say that was innovation, and it was just not needed. It was just something I built for fun.
Yeah, and for me personally, I think that my strategies have not usually involved limping, but there have been certain times where I've been like, oh, that would be amazing in this final table spot or final two tables or whatever it is. And I can see some reality in the future where people look back on 2022 and say, I can't believe people weren't utilizing limping strategies in the same way that we would look back at 2012 and be like, I can't believe people weren't like bluffing rivers, check raise
Right,
bluffing rivers or bet raise bluffing rivers.
that's absolutely correct. One thing I want to say though is it's interesting when you mentioned final tables. We've done so much work on calculating final table strategies, and yeah, I think like that's huge as well. Just learning like in which spot like ICM strategies dictate which strategy. That is, to me, that's been like the thing that's probably improved my game the most over the last year. It's just like running more and more final table stuff, like studying like how to play certain stack setups. So while that's not innovation, it's just something that needs to be done. It's, for some people it's tedious and boring, but that's how you get the results.
Yeah, and with the ICM thing, I've spoken to so many high stakes poker players, and the general consensus is that everybody thinks that everyone else is really bad at ICM, which is quite interesting to see. And I
I
personally, I back in the day, I used to put a lot of thought into ICM. I used to run, quite a lot of numbers before we had solvers. But since I haven't really done that because I haven't been playing too much poker. So it's one of the things that if I'm teaching my students, I might be like, hey, here's the concept you want to be drawing into this. Here's the idea. Here's the kind of pressure. Here are the dynamics. But if you want to run the numbers, you probably want to go look somewhere else and learn that from someone else. So Have you integrated any of that into any of the DTO products?
But the what
Yes.
exactly? What exactly?
The ICM strategies, the final table
Oh,
strategies.
yeah, like loads. Pre and post flop. We have an entire product dedicated to pre-flop simulations where we do that. And I personally think that it's huge because it's not about learning numbers. Like just what you said, it's not about that. It's about getting it's about like looking at a simulation, taking notes and understanding what drives certain factors. Then you look at another one, and then like next time you're in the real world, you can refer back to what you've seen, but you will never have the perfect answer mapped out, right? So like, final table situations are so different. So I think like again, this is like one thing where people get lost in like the chase of perfection, you know, when you can never play perfect poker. Uh, the idea is just to know how to play first against second in chips, or how to play as the short stack, etc. So you need like general concepts, and you need to learn them quick, and you need to sort of know what you're doing. And if you have like a decent idea of everything in poker, you're so far ahead of the curve. And that's like the quickest way to like not suck at ICM, as you put it, you know. Like ICM is very complex, but the reason most people quote unquote suck at is because they make it too complex, and then they want like specific answers. And sometimes it's okay to not have the right answer, you know. It's like you just need like a approximation.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've definitely seen some misapplication of a lot of the solver work with ICMs. Like there are some things, you know, I've not run solvers myself, but I've seen some high stakes people do make some call offs when they're third in chips against the second in chips for fucking sixes for 50 bigs or something against a reshove. And you're just like, I'm sure your solver told you to do that, but I'm sure you got it wrong. Like I'm sure you put some numbers in that were completely wrong to put in, and you came up with just a banana solution.
Oh my! Just yesterday. I'm assuming the person is watching who did this, but they deserve to be put on shame for that. They played like this is crazy. They played like a 9-handed final table sim. They played like they played 9-handed final table, and they had like a spot where they were chip leader against a second in chips, and I'll skip the hand. Basically, they end up completely butchering it. And afterwards,
I'd
like,
rather hear the hand if you remember. I love hearing hand histories.
it's not even about the hand. It's okay. Basically, second in chips opens UTG, and we're in middle position with a hand. And there's like a bunch of short stacks around. Like one guy has 5 big blinds, couple 12 big blind stacks. We have like 90 big blinds. They have 45 big blinds. And strategically, I hate talking hand histories for once. But
I love hand histories.
no, I just want to like, I'm more interested in the general strategy. But so in general, this is a spot we want to 3-bet a lot, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. We don't need a solver for this because, you know, first, second, we should 3-bet a lot. And basically, so in that instance, the guy had queens and he ends up calling, which is sort of whatever. I'd personally 3-bet. Okay, that's not the point. Yeah. The problem with the hand is that I think he calls, then someone else goes all in, and the original guy goes all in. And now he's like, what do I do?
Is that a question, or is that
that was the question proposed to me. A guy goes all in for 13 behind. Original raises all in for 45. We now have the queens. What do we do?
Where does the guy shove from? The 13 big
button.
Yeah, I'm oh fuck.
Right. So
I mean, queens is the line.
It's not just that is my initial reaction. It's the fact that you put yourself in the spot without like any sort of idea whatsoever. And then if you like, this is a great example for poor solver usage, because then the guy ends up like meshing it into some program, gets a completely messed up output, and it's like, look, it was fine. Like, what are you doing? You know, and it's yeah, you know, like that's then again like his solver also told him what he wanted the solver to say, kind of thing. Like it was close, it was right around the bottom, doesn't matter. But congratulations, you've just learned nothing. Yeah. You know, you like wasted your time setting up a 9-player tree. That tree needs to run for like at least a week before you can use it, because it's 9-player ICM. You completely wasted your time and energy. You got nothing out of this. What are you doing? And so, yeah, that's how I see people use the ICM solvers, when that's like the absolute opposite of what we should be doing. Like, look, if me and you talk about the same, we could just be like, well, you know, we should be 3-betting quite aggressively. Yeah, but like obviously fed calling is fine as well. So like that way, why are you running like a sim for this long already and like wasting your time doing this when you're never getting an answer that you want. I think people are just obsessed with answers in that one.
Yeah, and for me, it's a really nice parallel between the scientific community or how people see science and how people see poker. A lot of people, they really like to just avert their input to authority. They, instead of having a reality that they create for themselves, that they generate by thought and rational thinking, critical thinking and intuition, they love the feeling of being told, here's the answer. And I think it's probably what happens when you go to school and, you know, you have to sit in a class and teacher says, learn this, learn what, you know, the microbiome is, and learn the physical explanation for this word by word. And it's for me, it messes with people's minds. It's not a good way to learn anything.
That's why I said we would agree a lot, because this is in the end what it comes down to with poker. In poker, you don't get that definitive right answer. In poker, it's always depends, you know. I think like people love, they love to look up hands, man. They're just like, I played this hand great. And you know, like it doesn't even matter if like their thought process is right or if like what's in front of them even tells them that. They just want to be told they're right, man. It doesn't matter if the sim is solved accurately enough, or it doesn't matter if like it says 2% take this line or 100% take this line. This is all the same to people, man. Like they all want to be told they're right. They want like little points on their scorecard so they can sleep better at night.
I 100% agree, and it's one of the biggest pet peeves of mine when I coach people is if they come and you feel from their attitude that all they want you to do is say, "Good job, man." And those people, I'll be very, very consciously saying, "You fucked up that hand."
Charlie, and then also not just that, they also like if you don't give them that, they go to the solver. And then they come,
not my students.
Bro, then they come back and say to me like, look, I ran this, and if I wanted to, I could then pick the sim apart and be like, you actually didn't run this. You didn't, you know, because 9-handed ICM basically, I want to see someone like run this accurately. Like, good luck. It doesn't work that easily. It would be nice if it did.
Just, I'd like to change the subject on kind of how you and I might disagree after this, but just out of my own curiosity, because I've always wondered about this. My idea of the ICM solvers for the last 7 to 10 years that I've been learning poker has been that they're inaccurate because they don't take into account future potential ICM.
Among one things that is fair, yeah, sure.
Okay,
but some of them do. Sorry, for example, ICM Miser could do future game, yeah, sure.
So
but they only do.
So to do that, it would need to calculate so many iterations into the future, because then the future ICM would be affected by the future ICM of that hand and the future ICM of that hand. Can it do all of that?
ICM Miser could, yeah, but for like future games, you can set it to like 5 or something. You get good answers. But that's actually very useful for extremely short stack play, is my understanding. So if you have like 2-3 big blind hands or something you want to sim, you do on that future game. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Interesting. Yeah. So
it's not my absolute area of expertise, the super short stuff, but someone else might be better to ask about this. But it's my understanding that like when you're really short, future game is very useful. Of course, because you need to simulate where the blinds are next hand as well. You can't just, you know.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that, honestly, because I've had that conversation with people from the kind of GTO community, if we can call it that, and people have denied it. You know, they've said, no, this is fine. You just look at the sim and it says. So on that note,
that's again, you know, people just want to be right, like be told they're right or something, you know.
So on that note, I don't know how much you have seen of me online and the kind of the way that I'll play poker, the way that I'll teach poker.
I get sent some clips.
And I've definitely got a very different way of approaching poker, and I'm very vehement about it. I
don't think so.
Let's hear it. Let's hear the counter argument.
But you're saying yours is different. I personally don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe.
I've just for the past like, I don't know, 20 minutes. I've made a case for why I think most people just use solvers wrong. Mm-hmm. And like I say, in that way, I think my approach is different too. I think it's closer to yours than what most people will. But let's hear it. Where do we disagree?
I definitely agree with that. Like I was surprised by some of the things you were saying there. Like you said, I would be, because you were saying everything I agree with in the way that people misuse solvers. But I guess the way that I would see the way that I teach poker is completely different. Is Let's imagine not the output, not the actual result of how one would play a hand, but how the journey and how to get there, the thought process that you need to build up from scratch to decide whether you're going to bet check or whatever. The way that I would teach it is I would say, until you reach a certain point in poker, don't even think about game theory. Don't even think what the optimal solution would be and try and deviate from that. What you want to be doing is you want to be doing a concise range analysis of saying, okay, this is what my opponent's range is, and this is what I'm going to do about it. And whenever I have a student come in, it's nine out of 10 times if it's a new student, I'll get them to a spot. They'll open bottom the Jack 10. The flop would be like, I don't know, six. The big blind will defend. The flop would be like 6-4-3, 100 big blinds deep, and I'll be like, okay, so what do you do here? And they'll be like, I don't know. So they kind of have range advantage. So I probably want to use some hands as a check, but equally I have more aces. So I'm going to be doing this. I also don't, I want to be, protecting my check back range. If I had a hand like sixes, and it's like, dude, you have check.
That sounds like rambling. That's terrible.
100% rambling, 100% rambling. So what I say is take a breath, take a deep breath. What's your opponent's range? And what are you going to do about it? And they'll be like, oh, okay, he's got some ace highs, some king highs, and 7-6, some 6-5, straight, some sets, two pairs. And what are you going to do about it? It's like, oh, maybe I could bet a third. And most of the players' hands, assuming it's not a great player, most of them are just going to fold. Half of them are going to fold at least. And that is a very, very simplified how I teach like a 2NL player how to play poker. Whereas when I see people trying to teach GTO style, they'll say, okay, we've got this solution of what GTO says to do. Now, here's what the solution is. And if you want to exploit people, you need to deviate from this solution. And this is what causes so much mess in people's heads, is that they'll get it in their mind, like, I need to learn all of these GTO concepts. And then only if I learn that, can I learn how to exploit people. And for me, that's complete insanity. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that would be one of the differences.
I personally don't think about exploiting nearly as much in that way. So like when I would be looking at that board, I would just be, well, okay, first of all, is this tournament or cash game? Because then ranges will change.
I was thinking like Zoom cash.
Okay, this is Zoom cash, then ranges will change. So I would personally recommend to a beginner that I'd ask myself, well, like, is this a board like you'd want to check it? Would that be a board you'd be interested in checking sometimes? So like I would take a different approach where I would encourage the people to not think about that hand so much, because a hand really on the flop just doesn't matter too much. So I would basically say, what does your strategy want to accomplish? Like what sizing does make sense with all of these? What sizing makes sense with your range, their range, what makes sense on this board, etc. So on like a 6-3 deuce board, I would then basically say, okay, and also of course what makes sense with your hand, right? With Jack 10 off, you do want to bet, but that's also a thing in any sim you look at, you will also get the output that this is a hand that wants to bet quite often. So yeah, I would totally be on board with betting a third for the reason that then
I did say, I think I said 6-4-3.
6-4-3. It's more connected. But basically, I would then advise is that a hand like Jack 10 would be one of the first ones you do want to bet, because they do fold out all these overcards. That to me, just like the guy asking that question needs to be slapped basically and ask a proper question, because whether you can, there's multiple ways to play this hand reasonably, right? What matters is your overall strategy. If you give someone just the advice in isolation, you'd be like, bet this, okay, that's fine, bet this hand, fair enough. But I think you're not answering his real problem, is what I would say to that.
Yeah, I think we have a disagreement here in a sense, because when I'm teaching students that are pretty new to poker,
right,
what I will say is do not give a shit about what the rest of your hands will be doing in this spot. You're in a situation, you're in a real situation in reality.
Okay.
And in my opinion, what we want to be teaching people and the way that we want to be thinking about it is how in this situation, especially if it's Zoom, no, you're not going to play this, this scenario loads of times. How in this situation are we going to maximize the EV, maximize the amount of money that we can make purely in this hand against this player?
Right.
And you can definitely think, okay, what would you do if you had king queen? What would you do if you had ace queen? But for me, to think of your overall strategy is one of those things that really messes with people's heads. And I've
Okay,
seen.
hang on. I want to cut in there because I think I agree if you do it poorly. If you do it right, this can be very helpful. You can immediately say to a guy, bet your Jack 10, it's your bad Broadways, check your King Queen, that's your good Broadway because it dominates, it's a better hand to check for obvious reasons. That helps people a lot because that way they won't just be thinking about the cent anymore. They will take this to a different spot. Like I see this time and time again when like a beginner comes in and asks a hand history question and doesn't understand the difference between certain overcards. They fall into the trap that you say that they think too much about other hands. Sorry, they think too much about like what does this want to do, when really you need to just actually sometimes just know the difference and just be like, okay, Jack 10 is bad Broadway. I want to bet it. King Queen is a good one. I want to check it. That's completely fine. That helps. And it helps more in a general way than I think we're giving the same answer sort of, but we like
it's different. I think it's different. So for instance, I think this is actually a really good example because
but like a GTO strategy, all it does is maximize the value of your hand, right? Like you play every hand to its maximum capability. Now it's
only if the other person's playing GTO. Otherwise you're not doing that.
True, but if you plug it in a GTO solver, you node lock, it will give you the optimal strategy for any hand.
Right, but it won't. You won't know how the other person's playing. You won't. You'll have to then assume that they're playing GTO on future streets. That's not the way that you want to be. So
that's a whole different. That's all different. But what I'm saying is, you just want to maximize the EV of every hand you play, and that's all you do. So in this instance, you can say like, Jack 10, you want to bet for these reasons, but you want to check something else. And I personally think that this is very helpful to people. Just like to get like they don't get just one hand to learn from, they get two hands to learn from.
Yeah, and what I feel from it is that there are multiple paths up the mountain, and it's kind of like a spiritual thing. If you want to reach enlightenment, you can go through all of these different paths.
Absolutely. That's exactly
the way that I think we would disagree in the way to teach optimally there, and I think this is actually a really good example is, so let's say for instance we open button with Jack 10 or King Queen and we get 6-4-3 in the same spot. I would say c-bet all of your hands, because I would say here's a breakdown of their range, and I might get it up in front of them visually. It's definitely better to c-bet Jack 10 than it is Ace Queen, or it's better to c-bet Jack 10 than it is King Queen. But if we say we can bet a third against a 2NL player in Zoom and he's going to fold 50% of his hands, every single one of your hands is going to be profitable.
Yes.
And that for me is something that I've run into time and time and time again, even with mid stakes to high stakes players. They'll open, and I actually had a conversation with Mr. Kane about this, and he shared the exact same fucking frustration with trying to coach people. Let's say they'll open button, the big blind will defend, it will come like 3-3 deuce. They'll be checking behind in 2-0. They'll be checking behind all their fucking like ace kings and ace queens and things like that. And it's just like, if you c-bet, you're printing, and their reasons are like, well, I want to be checking back some hands, I want to be protecting my range, so sometimes I'll check back aces and shit like that. And it's just
God, like we do absolutely not disagree on this at all. In fact, I am one of the biggest proponents of simplifying and range c-betting. You will find. I personally think that's a great strategy. I love that. I personally think that's very underutilized. I don't think there's any training software out there that lets you train against simulations that range c-bet. I personally think that's great.
Yeah, I guess I'm not really just promoting the idea of range c-betting. We could think of loads of different examples as well, but what I'm a proponent of is not thinking about what the rest of your hands will be doing at all. And just thinking about what this hand will be doing and trying to maximize EV for this hand, because I do feel like we do agree way more than I would with somebody. Like I had a GTO debate with I think Chris Crook before.
Yeah.
I think that's his name. And he and I completely disagreed. So it was like speaking two different languages. So it definitely feels like we're closer together in the way that we think about it. But the way that I see so many people come, like I'll have literally I've had hundreds of students come in, and they'll have all of these ideas of how to play because they've watched, Phil Gauf on site, whatever it's called, Run It Up or Run It Once. I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to like shit. I just can't remember the names of everyone's sites. And they'll come there and with all of these different concepts and be like, my range wants to do this. I want to check back a set in this kind of spot. And I'm just like, no. Let's say you've this could be a good hand.
I get those guys too. I know what's coming.
No. Let's say we open button, pocket deuces, and we're up against an unknown in 2NL. Big blind defense. It comes ace, 6, deuce, 2 diamonds. What do we do? And what would your thought process be to kind of teach a new student?
I personally would say to the student, let's hear it. What's your strategy?
Sure.
What bet sizings do you use? Is what I would say to the student. And then they would usually just be like, oh. So,
brutal.
they maybe say something like, I ran this in some tool and I ran this with like 85 flop sizing, and they say that. But then I'd give them a talking to and say like, no, what's your strategy? What sizings did you use in game? And then based on that, I would give them a pretty qualified answer. So let's say if they say I'm using a bet 33% strategy, I'd just be like, okay, so you do that.
Right.
But if they say to me like I use a strategy that involves 33 and overbet, I would say like, did you choose the overbet? I probably like that better.
Okay, and I think that's a definitely reasonable approach. I mean, there's no denying that. The way that I would approach it, and I think that's kind of what I assume would happen, is I would say, okay, what is your opponent's range? And they'll be like, okay, he's got some air, he's got some ace X, he's got some flush draws, he's got some 7x or whatever I said, 6x, and he's got some pocket pairs. That'll be the range. But okay.
By the way, I think that's really useful for beginners to keep visualizing that.
Yeah, I constantly, when I first learned poker, I was constantly just trying to visualize it in my head. And then I'd be like, okay, so what are we going to do about it? And if they say, okay, I'm going to bet a third because it's a dry board, I would be like, you're out of here. Get the fuck. No, I wouldn't say it, but I'd be like, that's stupid. Think about it for a second. You're playing an unknown in 2NL. Let's just imagine he has a king, queen of diamonds, or he has like ace-7. How much do you think he's going to call? And they'd be like, I don't know. They'd be like, 3 times the pot? You're like, exactly. He would call 3 times the fucking pot. Bet 3 times the pot, because if he's going to call it, he's going to call it. Fish don't fold top pair on a 2NL, or right. Whatever the answer is, 2 times the pot, 1.5 times the pot. But it's one of those things where they have the idea that they need to bring in this strategy, this balanced strategy. And it's like, if you have bottom set, you don't have all these other hands. You have bottom set against a whale that ain't folding his ace-7, even if you make him bet his wife on it. He's just fucking never folding that shit. So that's how I would approach it. I'd always think about isolating that hand and maximizing value from it.
I'm personally like beating fish isn't difficult. It's not something I also find uniquely fascinating, So yeah, obviously you should if you don't come to the conclusion that you should overbet your set there against a bad player, what is wrong with you? No matter how you try to get there, you need to come to that conclusion. Whether you get there the way I said it by saying like, you want to use an overbet here for these reasons, or whether you come to it the way you described it, you're still at the top of the mountain. You figure out you need to overbet, right?
Yeah, and I agree in the sense that you and I would come to similar conclusions there. It really sounds like it.
Obviously,
I guess that I'm arguing for this way up the mountain because
it's faster.
It's not just fast. In my opinion, it's more accurate to reality. It's resonant with reality, because if you're looking at your overall strategy, like, people can definitely justify only having a pot size bet there, or only having a third pot size bet there, and you see it all the fucking time. And a lot of people will say, well, what else would I want to 3x the pot on the flop with? And you'd be like, well, definitely not a fucking bluff.
Yeah,
definitely don't only want to be betting like a quarter to a third with all your bluffs. So for me, the way that I like to teach poker is I like to say, think about how your hand plays against their range and just try and maximize the amount of money you make from that. When you get to 200L, when you get to 500 or maybe 100 to 200L, start thinking about your overall range and start thinking how you can be balancing that. Start thinking about GTO, because other people are going to be thinking about that as well. So you have to be on the level above how they're going to be thinking about it. But until you get to that point, don't even dream about what other hands you might have in this spot.
Right, but if you're playing a complete recreational, obviously you overbet. There's absolutely no debate there whatsoever. If your opponent plays bad and calls too much, the best line is to overbet, and be all in by the river. Done. Job done. You did great. I still think there is a lot of value into like helping. We don't want to be we don't want to teach the guy to be stuck at NL. We want to give him like more advice. You know, I agree that overbetting is right, and I agree that your way works too. I think maybe we can add more to their learning as well, so they understand and can replicate it better in the future as well.
No, I 100% agree with that.
Because to me, it's important to like not go to the guy and be like, you overbet this because the guy is a fish. They will have learned nothing from this that they can then use against the better player, right?
Yeah.
But if I say to someone, but like, look, this is how you can use this against the better player. Against the better player, you have one small, one overbet. Overbet against a good player, you do this. And personally, as I said before, I really don't care too much about beating recreationals. In that way, I don't find it entertaining for me to like teach someone how to beat someone, some NL2 players, because I just don't find that entertaining. I play high stakes tournaments. I enjoy playing against somewhat good players. Yeah, it's just a different game, completely different game.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I wasn't just trying to isolate just playing against a recreational player. If I were playing against a 200 Zoom reg, I would be 100% unbalanced in pretty much every single post flop spot that there is. Even in the, even when I was playing the 100K tournaments, and this is where you and I will probably have some disagreements. Even when I was playing the 100Ks, I would sometimes open 2.1x or 2x with pocket deuces, and in the exact same motherfucking spot, I'd open 2.7x with ace king, because I want a smaller SPR when I got deuces, and I want or when I want a bigger SPR when I got deuces, and a smaller SPR when a bigger pot when I got ace king. And if you don't make it obvious, nobody's gonna fucking guess. They're gonna be like, oh, something changed, someone else in the big blind or whatever. Nobody fucking notes that stuff.
Correct. Absolutely.
Good.
That's a fact. If none of this matters, if your pre-flop ranges don't look the same. In fact, the whole reason I limp and I raise big is for that very reason, that you can run your RTA against me all you want. If you have an RTA for button big blind against me, good luck. Doesn't help, because like I limp half of the hands that you assume are in my range. What are you gonna do now? So yeah, like all of this go back to what I said earlier, where like everyone sort of plays the same ranges nowadays. Everyone bought these Monker solver ranges, everyone plays them, and they're good ranges, especially if your other opponents use them as well, then they're actually optimal. But it's kind of like, funny how that works. If everyone uses them, then it's suddenly really good.
Yeah, it's weird, like Princess Dilemma kind of spot.
Yeah, pretty good. So yeah, that's the whole reason I play different. So but what can you do about it as the other player? Like you just see the guy 2.7x and you're like, I don't know, he miscounted the blinds went up. There's a different big blinds, different section. How the fuck are you supposed to? You don't, right?
Yeah, and so just to kind of finish off, and we'll move on. I do still think that you and I would have, even though we have similar kind of reasonings, I think that there are definitely two different styles of teaching here. And the way that I really believe in is building up from layer one and saying, okay, think about range analysis, then think about c-betting strategy, then adding on different layers and different concepts up until the point where maybe in the future you'll think about balancing, you think about other parts of this range. But from my, and I've really put so much time and energy and love into trying to work out how to teach most people optimally. And some people, they need the maths, they need the GTO straight off because they just got that kind of brain. But I've seen so many people, as soon as you break it down and simplify, and that's what I do in my masterclass, I fucking simplify it and say, even if you think you're a crusher, scrap it for a second and just imagine what would happen if you simplify your thought process to this, 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 and this, and this. And I've seen people's games go from just break even over 5 years to just fucking shooting up the stakes instantly. So I think that we're both very early on in the trajectory of poker. If we're still playing the game in 100 years, we'll have not only got better at poker, but we'll have found different ways to teach poker as well.
Absolutely.
And this is an exploration for you, as you've got a site, you've got software that teaches people, and for me as a teacher as well. And it's something that it's nice for me to hear from you, because you definitely have nuggets of information that I won't know, and I'll have nuggets of information that you won't know. And I think that this is something that's really under communicated in the poker community, because there's, the best players in the world all have fucking sites and they're all coaching out there.
Yeah.
But some of them suck at teaching. Some of them don't know why they're good at poker. you know, they've played 8 million hands of poker and they've got this really solid foundational intuitive understanding of poker, but they have no idea how to teach it. They have no idea what's even happening in their own brain. So that's why I really like to, as well, I like to try and separate out what happens in someone's brain, you know, the difference between intellect and intuition. When your intellect can work it out finitely, and when your intuition has to just like quieten down and just like, okay, here's everything I know about poker, here's this spot, I think I should do this, you know. And it's, for me, it's we're still so clueless on how to really get to the bottom of what's happening inside of our own brains, and it's something that I've never heard anyone speak about really in the high stakes community.
I absolutely agree, because I think also we're extremely clueless still when it comes to poker. I think, you know, earlier I said like people are pretty good at ICM, but also not really. And yeah, it's just a hard game, man. You need to simplification is very, very important in poker. I think people take on much more. They bite off more than they can chew with GTO specifically, and then they get stuck. And then someone somehow needs to slap them in the face and say, get back to simplifying. Whether that's me saying, here's a simpler solution, look at this, maybe that works. Or whether it's you saying, overbet your set, you idiot. It's the same thing. It's just like dressed up in a different way. That's how I look at it personally. So I think the biggest problem people have is overcomplication. Because poker is hard, so they try to take on everything at once, and then they obviously get stuck. Like the other day, someone asked me for advice. He was, this is another great example. He was stuck playing Zoom 100, and his win rate is 1 big blind. I don't know much about the game, but he assured me that he copies GTO, which I did not buy for 1 second. Like he's like, I copy this really well, you know. I do not buy this for 1 second. Like I'm not buying that you could like play DTO, right? You can't play the DTO app and give me like 20 excellents in a row in a spot I choose. You could not, you know. And then his argument was, yeah, but like XXX Elite Rec something also only wins at 1 big blind. Yeah, he compared his Zoom 100 games. Copying GTO, he wins at the same clip as like Elite Rec something else. It's like thought process all over. He wins at this, and again, the guy probably just overcomplicates the game. If he's stuck to learning a simple strategy, let's ignore for a moment how we get to that strategy. Just say, if you learn a simple strategy and you execute it well, you'll do just fine. You will win more than 1 big blind 100. Come on now, right?
No,
100.
Yeah, I think you can win 10 BB by 100 in that game.
If you, well, I don't know about that. The rake is high, whatever. The point is you win more than 1 BB. And the point is you don't need to like run like flop sims with like 85 sizings, and you don't need to like know what the best turn size is and whatever. No, you just need to know a strategy that's good enough, and then you execute it well. Like that guy is so caught up in his perfect solver world that he's just never going to get out of, because he's set himself in a task, a mountain he can't climb, so to speak. He's just sitting there like, you know, and then he just, you know, then there's other people who just like play a simpler strategy and win.
So maybe to bring it to another subject that relates to that, what do you think, from your opinion, after you've obviously coached a lot of people, you've seen a lot of poker players, what do you think it is that makes and breaks poker players, like the general tendencies and proclivities as a person?
Ooh, that's a great question. Openness to accepting that you're not as smart as you think you are is huge. You need to understand that basically we humans are not that smart at this game, and the game is too difficult for us. So like we have, you know, we lose to a robot and whatever. So I think what I find with people like from a mental side is like the ones that like fly off the rails and like have mental breakdowns, or like those just don't make it. It's not that they're not as smart as me, like at all. No, it's just that they, like some of them fall into this GTO trap. The other half like falls into like a trap of thinking they need to check every hand against like quote unquote GTO, which again doesn't make sense.
There's definitely some people that fall into the exploit trap where they think that they can just play based off their own intuition without learning any range.
But yeah, those guys too, obviously, right? And there's people who just, I think a lot of it just, again, like what I said, like people just take on too much. What do you think about that? Like people just make it too difficult for themselves, and they have too much, like they want too much from themselves.
Yeah, I think there's loads of truth to that, and I think that this is where I really believe in the difference between intellect and intuition. Like, your intellect can only really focus on one thing at a time. You know, if you're in a situation, you can't compute the final analysis of any poker hand, basically, or any poker spot, unless it's a very, very simplified spot. And this is where I'd say do as much learning off the table as you want. You know, simplify it to a point where you can literally understand it. But then take all of that when you're in a situation and you're trying to decide whether to bet or check on this flop on 6 through deuce with Jack 10, and just quieten your mind and just see what your intuition says. See what your brain does, instead of trying to think through it with all of these different rationales, with all these different things. So I definitely agree. There's people take on too much kind of brain computation. Their computational power is a lot lower than they seem to think a lot of the time. Another thing I think that, I mean, firstly, I think there's definitely something to be said that you need to be somewhat good at decision making, mathematics. At least you need to mathematical minds, and you need good emotional property. Like some people, I think there's a large percentage of people that are just not cut out to be poker players, and that for me is a tough conversation to have with people. Have you run into much of that?
What exactly, please? That people are over.
Just that people aren't smart enough, you know, they're not good enough at handling their emotions, or there's something about them that just doesn't mesh with poker. That I've had to have conversations with somebody that's like, I've tried to teach you this, you've tried learning GTO, it hasn't worked. Perhaps you're just not meant to be a poker player.
That's definitely a thing. Yeah. But that's what I said. It's like, I think people just need, if you have an ego that big that can't accept being told you're wrong, you are not gonna make it in poker.
Yeah.
If you just consistently trying to stroke your own ego, be like, yeah, I played this hand fine, and like, you know, like, yeah, it's exactly that. But I don't think it's fair to say they aren't smart. That's not right. That's not what it is. Like many of these people are probably smarter than me. They're just not as smart as they think, and they can't accept that.
Yeah,
I don't want to say anyone's not smart because of this, because it's just not true.
I guess it depends how you define smart. For me,
Yeah.
you know, if you were to place everybody in front of an IQ test, some people are going to score 80, some people are going to score 130.
Right.
On average, the people nearer the top range are going to be better at poker. That doesn't mean that's definitive. But if you're down near the 80 range, you're probably never going to be able to be one of the best poker players in the world, because even if you put all the work in, so are all the people who are at the top end of the range. And it's for me, it's one of the toughest conversations to have with people. It's like, perhaps you're better at art, perhaps you're better at music, perhaps you're better at sales, selling things, but maybe
sure, that is true. But I don't think, like, even then, those people, they have a ceiling in poker, yeah, but that just because you have like an IQ of 80, I personally don't think that means you're stuck at NL 5, to throw out a ridiculous number. You can beat NL 5. Know what I'm saying?
You might be right on that. 80's pretty low. 80's pretty low.
Okay, I don't know. Okay, probably like not. Okay, you know, but also then again, your IQ,
4% of the population or something.
Okay, I don't know. But then again, also your IQ probably isn't 80. Point remains, if you're like 90 IQ, okay, that's even better then. Like, look, you're not gonna be, say like you're like 90 IQ. So what? You know, like there's a guy like they're 10 IQ points higher than you. Well, then you can probably still outwork these guys. Can you make it to super high stakes? Probably not. Does that matter? No, not really either. You know, you don't need to be a super genius to beat tournaments, and you certainly don't need to be a super genius to beat NL 100.
Yeah, you don't need to be a super genius to bink the Sunday Million one time and put it all into Bitcoin and then
the
rest of your life.
That's also a good strategy. Or if you're really good, you just bink it multiple times and keep putting it into Bitcoin. But so no, all joking aside, though, I don't think that's fair. I think poker it's because if it was closer to chess, where everyone studies the same material, I would 100% agree that you're screwed if you're like not intelligent at all. But if you have access to better information, and thankfully poker is at a stage where it's just about quality of information, you can still crush by putting in little effort, just with access to good information.
I would agree with that in the majority of cases, for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe to get a little bit more personal, what do you think it is that made you so good at poker? Like you have an incredible record from what I just searched online. You have like 20 million live caches. You have a crazy record online. What do you think it made you so good?
I put in the time on an IQ test. I didn't score exceptionally high or anything. I just put in the time. I am fairly good at, over time I've built up a decent understanding of sort of how strategies get structured. And the only way I was able to do this is by looking at sim after sim after sim. I didn't have anyone to teach me. I didn't have anyone to hold my hand. I have done the work myself. And yeah, but for me, obviously, I just put in more time. Quite simple. I don't think I'm smarter than necessarily anyone. Actually, I'm certainly not smarter than someone like Ike. I just put in the time. I just like playing the game. I enjoy the game. That helps a lot. You know, I enjoy still playing Sundays, and sometimes I enjoy talking about hands, although I enjoy talking about strategy more. I'm just the kind of person who tries to play reasonably well, and that's all I do. I show up, I register, I play cards, and that's what I do. I think it's and when I learn, I learn from like running simulations. I try to find patterns. I don't focus on specifics. I focus on general rules that help me. As I talked about the ICM learning, it's helped me a lot to not do. I completely stop solving hands. I don't care about hands I play. If I fuck up a button against big blind hand, I'll sit down and play that spot in DTO for 100 hands every day until I feel better about myself. And I don't care if I misplay a hand. What really drives me crazy if I don't understand a spot, if I can't give anyone a good answer. And yeah, basically it's stuff like this. What would you say?
What would I say for what? For you or for me?
Yeah, and both actually, right? What would you say? So if you play against me, you know, I mean, people will think I'm a GTO robot or something, but that I don't view myself in that way at all. I just try to look at stuff that I have, and then I just play. And then like next time I'll try to do better. And I fuck up along the way, but so what? Like,
so I think from what I've recognized about you, you're being very humble there, which I love. I super appreciate that, and it's not the most common personality trait within the poker community. I will say that it's very obvious from speaking to you that you have. I don't know if IQ is the right metric, but you're more rational by a long margin, probably at least two.
That's just repetition. That's what I'm saying. I just look at this and then I do this, and then if I try to like never like think too much about a single hand, because I think then you just fall into a rabbit hole. Like
yeah. I feel you. I feel you. I guess what I'm trying to say is that sometimes when I'm speaking to somebody in a conversation like this, we're not playing poker, and I'll have to slow down the rational thought processes I have to slow down the explanations of a concept. With you, I don't have to do that because, your rational capability is really, really good. And I'm just going to say that as a fact. Maybe let me try and think what else I think makes you good at poker. Obviously, there's the hard work. The humility is a really, really big point. And I think that the way, from what I've learned in this conversation, the way that you manage to think conceptually is crucial. And if you were doing that your entire poker career, I think that that's phenomenal, because a lot of people, when they're learning the game, you weren't. Okay, well,
no one was. No. I also used to be part of the group that would like figure out the best size in the solver or something. There was like something that clicked for me with my understanding of poker when I started using solvers properly. And that's sort of when I started doing really well.
How long ago was that?
2015, 16. Yeah.
Yeah. And so at least from this point, I can tell that you're thinking very well conceptually. And for anybody listening, I think that if you're learning anything, if you're learning chess, poker, dancing, singing, maybe not dancing, singing so much, but definitely an intellectual game, one of the best ways to approach learning the game as an entirety is to think conceptually about, okay, when I'm playing chess, what kind of pawn structures are really good for a position. And what happens, in my opinion, if you learn something conceptually, is you have this deep intuitive memory bank or feeling of it. You understand the soul of a position. And that's kind of what you were saying, is like when you're, and I've heard chess players speak about chess like this as well. It's like when you're looking at a spot, you understand the soul of the spot. You might not be able to put it into words instantly, but it's like, I know that these kind of hands are meant to be checking in these kind of situations. And then, you know, if you push to it, you'd be like, okay, it's probably because of this, this, and this, and this. And that is something that I think is really underestimated, is like conceptually understanding it and just having that knowledge of a field within you, and then being able to pull it out when you're in game and saying, okay, because I feel it, because I understand it intuitively and intellectually, I can then make good decisions in game.
Yes. Yes,
so,
absolutely. That's what it is. Yeah.
So when you're playing, do you have you put much thought into keeping yourself in your A game? This is something I speak about a lot, like looking after yourself, you know, mentally, physically, and I use the word spiritually quite often.
I need sleep and I need coffee. I'm a simple person.
Do you not have any kind of rituals if you go off to Vegas or something? For me, coffee. What I would always do this thing when I was on EPT or something. I'd start off with one coffee, say like final table on day 3, have a coffee at 1 a.m. because it's high EV, and then not be able to sleep the next night. Have like 6 coffees the next day, and it would just get exponentially into. Like,
that's just a normal day for me. Yeah. No, but I do that too. I just like coffee. It doesn't really. Yeah, I mean, I'm not the ritual kind of guy. Again, that also helps with this, in my opinion. And like some people will definitely disagree with this, but I think I don't really experience like A game, B game swings nearly as much, because I just show up and play cards, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's like, obviously there could be external factors, like if something go, you know, that could definitely influence my decision making. I'm not a robot, but
just more of a robot than other people.
I certainly try to be more like a robot in that instance. But the way I think about poker is not that like I don't fly off the rails in any way. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I feel you, brother. I think you and I are definitely different in that sense. Like my game fluctuates between A game and Z game pretty often. I'm a lot better at it now. And actually, when you and I used to play in the high stakes, I used to be a lot more like you. I wouldn't have too many days off my A game. But something I've noticed is I've taken some time away from poker. I've worked a lot on, you know, doing other things that opened up my emotions a lot. It turned out I was repressing so many emotions, is that I was a lot more emotional, and that influenced my game a lot. And I think in some ways it really helped, because the way that I see it is that the more open you are, the more aligned you can be to access intuition and to make good, concise decisions. But in other ways, it made it really fucking tough. Because, you know, somebody would send me a mean text, and like, you know, I'd have a breakup or something, and I'd be like, well, there goes my A game and my B game and my C game and whatever fucking else of the alphabet.
Just don't play then. Jesus.
Yeah,
that's all I can do. Right?
That's exactly it. And that, for me, what I like to teach, and especially if you're teaching people who are more emotional, you know, a lot of the people in my close circle of coachees, students, there, maybe 12 of us, 15 of us, they're pretty emotional people in general. So a lot of the work that we have to do is understanding ourselves and saying, okay, when are we okay to play poker and when are we not? And what do we do when we're not? Do we learn poker? Do we go out and just fucking sing? Or do we go and sit next to a tree? Like, what makes you feel better to the point where you can get inside your A game by tomorrow or by this evening or something like that?
Right. Yeah, that's certainly something that I don't have any experience with.
Yeah,
it's a different area, right?
I definitely understand what it feels like to, and it's very nice to be able to have a pretty stable, consistent game. Do you feel like poker's influenced how you interact in your everyday life in different ways?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
In what way?
Yeah, okay. In a way that if you're consistently dealing with numbers and it could be anything that gives you rational feedback all day, it does mess with certain things in your life. for better or for worse. You know, I find that basically everyone. I'm not the emotional kind of guy. I personally compare. I'm pretty much on like the low end of the spectrum there when it comes to being emotional. And yeah, I think like my tolerance for nonsense is pretty low. But that's also shaped by running DTO as well. It's that like my tolerance for people doing the wrong thing or like not doing a thing properly is incredibly low. Also, I certainly had to get better with that in many ways. I can still be a guy who's like a bit cold to people, and that's sort of how I've been shaped. I would attribute that to poker as well. Yeah, as I said, for better or for worse, I find that I try to be extremely logical even in places where it probably isn't for the best.
I noticed that when I was playing a lot of poker is that I would end up over rationalizing things that sometimes it's better not to. And
Yeah.
I would notice that I'd be less connected to my body in terms of like, less sensitive. I'd be less connected to other people, animals, and nature and things like that. I do think that it's possible to play poker without that happening. But the general tendency from what I've seen is a lot of people, it's, it's such a predatory game. It's such a logical game. And it's such a natural reaction to just get in and just be like, I need to be as robotic as possible. And if you do that day in, day out, then that's for sure.
And also in a way, it makes you somewhat cold-blooded, where you just like you see someone mess up, you just go for the throat, and in poker, that's just what you do, If like
sorry, after you.
So in poker, if like you see an amateur who makes like colossal mistakes, you go for that guy. That's what you do. And in many ways, this isn't sort of how the real world works, so to speak. In the real world, you don't do that.
No, best not to. You can if you want to try and crush people's souls, but that's something I've noticed. That's something I've noticed a lot in students is that one of the biggest things that makes or breaks students is that ability and that desire to be a fucking beast. I mean, if somebody doesn't have that, and I have that especially with the women that I teach, if they don't have that desire to just crush somebody's soul, they're not going to be great at poker, because you need to be in there. If there's even a slight bit of empathy, I don't want to take this guy's money, what if it's for his kids, bar mitzvah or whatever, then suddenly you're not going to be playing on your A game. You're going to be thinking about bar mitzvahs when you should be thinking about c-betting strategies. And you got to be willing to take every single last cent away from that kid's trust fund.
That's correct. And like the way to combat this is you're not playing with money. Your job is you're playing the game. Everyone's out there to try to win. So that's to me, like I get that some people think that, but to me that's like very, very far from that I couldn't even understand. If you're thinking like that, then that's extremely problematic, because it's so far off. But yeah, it's an example. I can see that. Yeah.
What's your relationship with money? I assume you didn't grow up to be super successful, making millions of dollars, doing anything else. So I assume you went from not having tons of money to having tons of money. How did your relationship with money change?
Well, I made a bunch of money when I was in high school, and yeah, I mean, I was 16 when I started playing, so I never actually had to worry about money in my life. Then I just made a bunch of money online, and then I just wanted to play poker for a few years, and that somehow turned into this.
What did you, when you were growing up, did your family have a lot of money?
No, not really. I can reasonable amount. So, like, we had our own house. Things were good. I did not have to worry about money there either.
Yeah, I think for me, because my family was pretty poor, part of my desire to play poker is that I was always looking for some other way to make money.
Right.
Where do you think your desire to make money came from when you were 16 and found poker?
It's just the game. I like the game. Like, okay.
Like games.
So I was terrible at sports. I was terrible at some other things. I wasn't really good at video games. I wouldn't say terrible. I wasn't very good. And then I found poker, and suddenly it wasn't about my reaction speed. It wasn't about how fast I could run. It was just about being like better at the game than the other dude. I can do that.
It's interesting that you say that you weren't good at video game. Were you good at other things like maths in school?
I used to be quite good but just when I was much younger.
Yeah.
I still played video games, and I played them like reasonably well, but I wasn't like pro gamer material by any means.
Yeah. For me, it was I loved video games so much that at the age of 14 or 15, I had to say I'm never playing any video games anymore. I just banned myself from it because I was fucking obsessed with like RuneScape and all of this shit. And then I found poker.
Warcraft 3 for me.
Oh yeah, no. Did you say World of Warcraft?
Warcraft 3, not Warcraft.
I'm gonna call out my student Helena. She's obsessed. You should speak to her about it. She's obsessed with World of Warcraft. She would
World of
love to be able to
Warcraft.
speak to
Nah,
her.
I don't like World of Warcraft. Warcraft 3.
Wait, what are you saying?
Warcraft 3. I don't even know that.
No,
Oh,
that's this is another MMORPG.
No, it's a strategy game.
Okay. Well, sorry for randomly calling out my friend for playing in World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft, yeah.
I think that one of the things I like about poker is that it's made being nerdy cool. Like that, you get someone like Ike in other professions. He wasn't going to be cool, but in poker, he's a fucking beast. Like he's a boss. Like everyone looks up to him. He's like, what a fucking nerd, and that's sick. And he's made tons of money, and he's traveling the world, and he's got the fame, or whoever else it is. And I love that about poker. That the people that have succeeded the most tend to be pretty nerdy.
Sure, I'll agree to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to nerds listening. Finally getting a win in the books after a fucking millennia of being kicked around.
The problem is if you're too nerdy, you're gonna end up like what I described earlier.
Yeah, no, it's definitely.
Don't be too nerdy, Ike's.
So what are your long-term plans with it? You've made a ton of money. You've got a successful business now. What are your life ambitions?
Keep running the business. I mean, it's not something you just do for 2 years or 3 years or whatever and just walk away from. But getting good growth, I would eventually like to do other things with it. I'm not saying I don't like what I do. I just think that there's room for more. We have a good product range. We make decent income. And I just think there's room for more. It's just that like we're a small team, and I still play cards, and I want to do other things. So while this is like my main job now, I would like to do other things with it. So yeah, certainly grow it, see if we can expand into other areas, and I'll play some cards as well. I try now that that live poker is sort of back. I want to play some more. Yeah, it's hoping it's.
What about things outside of poker? Life ambitions.
Life ambitions. Get married, have kids. Fairly soon.
Is that a big thing for you, having a family?
I'm gonna have to say yes.
Wait, are you with someone? Is someone like behind you, being like, "Is that?"
No, I've been with my girlfriend for almost 8 years now. She's
dude. I didn't know. Yeah, congratulations on that. Yeah, definitely say yes very loudly.
Yeah. But yeah, like these sort of things as well. It's just that's just like private life where I don't think like I don't think the audience cares too much about me having a kid or
I'm just going to pull up the chat, guys. Does anyone out there care about Dom's private life? Does anybody care deeply about what Dom's doing in his private life? Blah says we care.
That's
yes.
Nice.
Somebody else says yes. Somebody else says yes. Somebody else says yes. Somebody else says yes. There's a lot of people saying yeah.
Yeah.
There's a few trolls in there as well.
Still no. Yeah, but I just think I just want to continue building the business. We got a really good thing going, and it's really fun. I personally just like building stuff that I think people will enjoy. Or that I should say I know people will enjoy. So like whenever we put out something new, I already know what the reaction is going to be of people, and I just like building things where like people say to me, what I like most of all this is like I like building something where people are like, oh, that is cool, or like it's people who I respect who like understand and they look at this and they're like, oh, this is cool. I can learn from this, and I can look at it and learn something. So like to me, this is just very fun, and I get paid for it too. So
no, that's really
it's
nice
just
of you
it's great.
to think of it like that, man. So I guess one last question from me, then I might do a little Q&A with the chat if you're open to that.
Sure.
I guess the last question to just kind of tailor off the difficulties that you have with these other products that are out online. Do you want to just give like a little sales pitch, or whatever kind of style you want, to say why you think that your
Why are we
company or
different?
what you've created is better than, say, Odin, or better than what's that Finding Equilibrium one? I don't know what that's called.
Yeah, GTO X.
Yeah, and that one.
Yeah, it comes back to what I said much earlier as well. I said, like, we apparently use way higher accuracy when working with simulations. You want to aim for at least 0.5% accuracy.
Can you just describe what that means to people that
it just means that in very simple terms, it means that you let the sim run long enough. Because if you look at a simulation, it will approach, if you let it calculate, it will approach 0. And what it translates to is it's what what the strategy loses. Basically, you want to approach 0, and you don't need to understand anything. You just need to know that this number needs to be as low as possible. If it's a high number, you will see a lot of mixed strategies. For once, you can't execute them, and for the other, they're just not as good.
Yeah.
Put simply, you want to be very accurate. Then the other thing I want to say is that we try to use less sizings. We try to make all of our stuff more simple. We don't get too much into the into like the deep end of like trying to do like analysis that doesn't really matter, and we try to like respect that we as humans are, we need to learn like with something that's somewhat simple. You just need to like, you need simple guidelines, and you can get them from us. And if you want to learn how to play anything, ICM, if you pre-flop, post-flop, if you want to learn all of these, you have to understand that poker is extremely complex. And if you're gonna obsess over which flop c-bet size to use, you've already lost because you've taken on a task that you cannot execute. And if you for one moment believe that you can execute a flop strategy that recommends 2% of this and like 20% of this and like 2% of something else. So basically, if you believe that you can execute a flop strategy that uses 4-bet sizings, you're lying to yourself, and this won't end well, no matter how smart you are. So the sort of sales speech goes, whenever someone says to you something is true GTO or it has all the sizings, they're not telling you the whole story. And to sum it up with us, I will never tell you DTO is true GTO, because it's not. But that's not what it's about.
So maybe just to finish off on that kind of back and forth you had with Fedor about the Odin solvers, because I know a lot of people were asking me to try and cover that. Do you still stand by it? And just to clarify for people watching, you were sent by one of your students or somebody that you know one of the solutions in Odin, Fedor's own software solver company. And it was very, very different to yours, and also very, very similar to solver if you placed it at lower accuracy. So if it wasn't as close to 0.
Suspicious, huh?
Very, very. It definitely raised some questions.
It's very suspicious. It makes you wonder how you get these results. Well, they claim 0.5% accuracy. Can I grab their sims and check for myself if there's 0.5 accuracy? Of course I can't. I don't have access to their sims. What I can do, however, is can look at other simulations. So what we did, we looked at like 2 more simulations. They both looked like they were stopped too early. Those were posted on Twitter. I also looked at a pre-flop range, which also looks like it was stopped too early. Because like with 40 big blinds blind against blind, it did recommend a bunch of limping with suited aces, which in our pre-flop simulation come out to a pure race. Let's face it. And if what I know about sims is that when you stop them too early, these are the outputs, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. I think this is very suspicious. Again, they claim to have developed something that's better than PyroSolver, and they claim to have reached 0.5% accuracy. Hey, I don't know. Should we be skeptical about this? Probably yes. You know, so if you make a claim like this, you're better than Pio, you gotta back it up. So far, I've seen nothing to back it up. So
what would it take from Fedor or from Odin? What would they have to show you for you to say, okay, maybe I was wrong about this? What would you need to see to change your mind?
that is a great question. I'm happy to look what they show me. Honestly, whatever they show me, I'll give it a look. So far, I haven't seen anything. I had a chat with the Simple guys who I'm friendly with, the Russian crew who makes their product, and they also assured me that they think it's not accurately solved. Because of the way all the solvers work, they will approach the 0%, they'll approach zero exploitability. And once you get that close, your strategies will look very similar. You won't have a difference of 15% check to 30% check. That only exists at 2% exploitability. Now, again, what like some people don't know is I asked the Simple guys, and they said it is possible that the algorithm isn't as good. Because if an algorithm isn't as good, it will not give you the right answer. It could be a fast algorithm they use, and that just doesn't give the right answers. To me personally, that's the most likely outcome.
So Fedor's response to you posting one of the sims was to post it and say that the two sims were pretty similar.
I'm sorry, that's just nonsense. I don't know. I don't want to debate. I don't want to debate with someone who says 15% check is the same as 30% check.
One of the counter arguments I heard to that is that they might still produce similar EV, which I don't agree with that counter argument. But do you want to just rebut that?
There is no evidence of this. If you make a claim that a strategy that is that different, if you claim that strategy is that different, you need to back that up and run it in a solver and verify that this is really just 0.5% exploitability. But I can't do it. They would need to do it themselves, run it, and then post proof of that claim.
Yeah. So what you might need to see is them giving some transparency to the back end of their algorithm and their solver, and say like, hey, here's us running a sim. Here's the algorithm that they don't have to share the algorithm if that's sharing too much. But here's it happening. Here's us running it for fucking a week or whatever, and here's the same result that we got.
Yeah, that would be good. But I obviously understand that they can't do that. So
why wouldn't they be able to do that without showing the actual algorithm? Wouldn't they be able to just show that it's running for a certain amount of time with certain computational power?
I don't think they would want to do that. I could understand why they wouldn't want to do it.
I could understand why they wouldn't, but if there are some accusations floating around about something that I made, I would want to just be like, hey, look, here's the receipts.
I mean, if someone says to us, our sims are broken, I could show them something as well. Would I want to reveal everything? I don't know about that either. But that's not my position to tell them you need to do this. This is how you need to run your business. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah,
they could have the reasons to not want to show it. Who am I to judge?
Yeah,
I'm just the guy who said like the sim doesn't look right. What's up? It's not on me to verify their claims, and like they won't. Like, why would they? They don't owe me that, and I just
I think you come across a lot more gentle when you're not on Twitter, by the way.
It's just because I'm limited to whatever characters. I mean, I was quite honestly pretty. It's no secret that I got mad there a little bit, given their track record of claiming they're better than our product. Given on multiple instances, they're like, we're better than DTO and we have all these sizings.
They really say that. They really say, hey, we're better than DTO.
Yeah.
That's a low blow.
That's on their front. Yeah. It's a
low bar.
Like it's a low bar. Like what? No, I just fucking.
That's below the belt, man. That's
on their front page, it literally says we are the best, and then they say they have more bet sizings than us, therefore they're the best.
Wow.
They have more.
No wonder you're getting defensive.
Hey,
imagine if what's Rich guy Ben CB said, hey, I'm the #1 poker coach in the world, better than Charlie Carrel because of this. I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. Honestly, mate, I don't know what the fuck that was about. But I get it. It's like I can't be too mad. It's like the stuff that then drives me insane is when they question our sims and like they can't back up shit. Like this was the fact that they've been out for like, I don't know, half a year or something, and I was the first one to pull this out, this is crazy. People just eat up everything you sell them. That's all I'd say to that. And no one checks anything. You can sell people complete garbage under one condition. It makes them feel good.
Yeah, I keep selling people meditation. They keep lapping it up. Fucking idiots.
Nice, but it makes them feel good.
Yeah.
Maybe you can pivot into poker coaching that is not real poker coaching and just gives out wrong information and stuff. You could do that.
People actually make conspiracies. I've heard this conspiracy theory about me many, many times, including from like 500 Zoom regs. People think that I'm secretly a solver fiend, that I've worked out loads of GTO, and that's the only reason that I can beat like 500 Zoom consistently. But then I'm just telling all of my audience the complete wrong thing to troll and make money. It's some wild accusations being thrown around out there.
People don't even know what solver fiend means. If they actually knew what solver strategy looks like, they would look at this and just be like, yeah, Charlie just plays reasonable poker, whatever. Doesn't matter how you get there, as long as your end result is playing reasonable poker.
Yeah, I definitely don't play solver approved poker. That's maybe if I ran specific sims, it would eventually be. But any sims that I've seen, they're not min raising turns with second pair enough.
Sometimes you're not a complete. Your basic point is you're not a complete whale. So what the hell,
So one thing that I remember people really wanted to speak about, and this is a really big worry within the online poker community, is things like DTO and Odin being turned into RTA. And for people that don't know, RTA is real-time assistance, meaning that some people allegedly, and some people have actually been caught out, shout out to Abora, have been using that fucking guy, man. I used to play. I'll finish this first, but I'll tell you about more.
I played him too.
Have been using solvers in game and been cheating and winning loads and loads of money from it. And that the worry is that you're creating products with DTO or Odin that people might be able to use as RTA. What do you think about that?
Have you used DTO?
No, I did one when somebody gave me their phone. I think Open gave me their phone, and I was like,
in Monaco probably, yeah.
And I was like, I played it perfect GTO, and you didn't believe me, but all I had to do was just like check down fives on a board.
Right. Okay. So to that I would say, since you haven't used DTO, it's just a trainer. For one, like the DTO is just a trainer. You can't put in any real inputs. Do you want to like have DTO up with like one flop that was randomly assigned out of our subset, and then wait for?
I see. So you don't actually have you can't put your own input in. It just gives you a random spot.
Yeah. Do you just want to like screenshot the solution for in case it comes up in the future, this very board and stuff? Would you like that?
I hope there's one 2-0 player that screenshotted every single one of those on their phone.
if they fucking cheat like this, more power to them.
Yeah, fucking.
So your dedication, yeah, but basically to that, I'd say you can't cheat. Actually, interesting enough, there will be some changes made in regards to DTO flops, where you will be able to choose a flop. Now, on us, then it's on us to do to protect against RTA when that happens. Yeah, sure, that's a given. I think.
What are you going to do to protect against it?
We don't have the flop selector ready yet, so that's for the future. But it's likely just going to be a timer.
Exactly.
So basically, what we can do is like we can allow the flop choosing right away, and we can say if you want to look at the entire strategy, here's a timer.
I think that's great. Yeah. So what do you think about the other products out there like Odin? Do you think that they could potentially be used as RTA?
I personally. Everyone's been like, yeah, Dom, now talk about RTA, get them. The RTA smackdown. It's like, well, for starters, they have like a 20-second timer on their thing. I think the confusion people have over this being RTA comes from all the sizings. I don't necessarily think it's that good of RTA. Like, obviously, don't use it in game, huh? Jesus, but.
Yeah, I mean, it would take a long time.
I don't think it's fair to call out
everything and then get the 20 seconds and then have to make a decision. I think that it seems pretty unrealistic that somebody would be able to do that.
I've been bashing Olin pretty hard, but I don't think it's entirely fair to say they like the RTA program out there. Oh, I don't know about that. Is the 20-second timer long enough? I don't know about that either. Personally, I don't use Odin, and certainly I don't use it like that.
Yeah, I guess the issue is that if somebody's playing very high stakes poker, they might find a spot where they're tanking on the river and they're like, I don't know what to do here. And then they just have it to the side just in case that happens. I think that could be an issue.
That's an issue with PyroSolver as well. That's an issue with having a second computer as well. This is not entirely fair on the program creators.
Yeah,
you agree with this, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if we'd have to maybe standardize things, but the problem is if you standardize and regulate, then the people that cheat are going to have a huge advantage and just make their own software. And I think that from what I've heard, that seems to have happened in the online poker community anyway. What is your opinion on that? Do you think that there are some of the top players out there are actually using RTO that they've created themselves?
Yes.
All right, who?
Nope. How the fuck would I know that?
Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
I mean, if I, like, how would you know this? Jesus, you just need to like supervise the guy's computer.
I've got to be honest. I played somebody recently, heads up, and I was very, very suspicious about it, just by timings and certain plays that they made, and just like getting a really weird computer vibe.
Getting a sketchy feeling. Have you played some random people heads up?
I played some high stakes heads up just to, I never played heads up before, but I ended up playing some of the best players in the world for LoLs.
Yeah, it's fucking sad. I used to play a bit of heads up. I quit. Obviously, assuming that my opponents would just cheat. Hey, it's just what it is, no? It's so easy.
No, I really don't. I don't like
that. That part is so tough because, look, I you can just have like a laptop, you can have like a tablet, some solutions. Point is, it's difficult. Heads up cash is not a game you should be playing. Heads up no limit cash certainly is not a game you should be playing.
What about six max no limit cash? So you can still use RTAs in that. You
can, yeah. I play tournaments.
Yeah, tournaments. What do you? We'll skip that because there's a lot of things we could say about online poker there. But what do you think about tournament players using pre-flop charts that are so nuanced that they'll say 42 bigs when you're defending BB versus MP, you're meant to be defending this range. What do you think about them having those up in front of them?
What do I think about it? Ethically?
Yeah.
Don't do it, but everyone does it, kind of thing. and then also when someone does it, it doesn't really matter too much. Because here's what people don't get, right? People look at these things and they think what matters is like that you take your, hang on, I'll just for fun, pull up something from DTO, bum, bum, bum. Okay, it matters that you take your ace 5, 75% or whatever, right? Nonsense. What matters is frequencies.
Yeah.
And this is again what I was saying earlier. You can these people who get stuck in the GTO trap, they get stuck because they just run against the wall and try to memorize everything or like try to chase perfection. Again, like what matters is frequencies, It doesn't matter to me that the solver says ace 5 is a 3-bet at X%. What matters to me is that the solver says you're 3-betting X% of your range. So to that, I would say it's less efficient cheating than anything anyway, ever, because what matters is your range. And also that little bit of cheating pre-flop doesn't really help you anyway. So I think mostly the funny thing is pre-flop charts are used by beginners. So let them have it. If it makes them feel more confident, let them have it.
Yeah, I get it's a really tough one because if you say don't use them, then people will still use them. So it's ethically, it's one of the most unenforceable rules that you can possibly have out there. I wish we could have a community where these things didn't exist, where we couldn't have charts up in front of us, because I do believe that it's, we have only a few decisions in hand to make ever. There's only maximum going to be like 6 decision points or something like that. And if you're taking one of them away, then you're making the game less skill-based and you're making it more just, doing what you're told based. So I personally, I don't like the use of pre-flop charts. I don't like the use of HUDs for similar reasons. I think any kind of computer assistance is no bueno. I never use a HUD myself. But at the same time, I completely understand why everyone else does, because everyone else is. It's like, why would you not if everyone else is?
Yeah, sadly true. Sadly true. If everyone else uses something, you then get the argument of I should also use it. And again, though, with preflop arguments, I think I just made a case that it actually doesn't matter. Sure, like use your preflop charts against me. I literally do not care. Because I remember all the frequencies anyway. I know what frequencies I want to 3-bet in theory, and I know what I want to do against certain people.
Yeah,
and I roughly know how to construct that range that gets me there.
I think the issue that people run into is that when playing against recreational players, the recreational players might not know that everyone else has these charts and that they have these HUDs and things like that.
Right. Yeah, that is messed up.
Yeah. So what I would like to see is from the poker sites to say, okay, if everyone's going to use fucking charts, here are the charts. Put them in the software. If everyone's going to use a HUD, do what GG does. Have a fucking HUD.
Right.
Embedded in their software. At least if it evens the playing field. Because I did a bunch of poker with True Geordie. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
And on session 10, after he'd played some fucking high stakes tournaments and somehow crushed, after his like fucking min 3-betting strategy just annihilates people, I tell him about HUDs and he's like, well, that's fucked up. And I was like, I forgot to even mention it because it's such a natural thing to me. But yeah, it's recreational players don't know.
I'm just thinking just now about what you said about giving charts to people. I'm not sure how I'd feel about that. Giving people starting in charts. I don't know how I'd feel about it, honestly.
So do you feel like maybe we should say no to professionals using them as well then?
Obviously, yes. Obviously, you shouldn't use them. My God, you should just play cards.
Yeah.
Ideally, you play so many tables that you cannot even possibly do any of this.
Yeah. So the conversation that came up between Doug and DNegs when they were playing the heads up, and at first DNegs was like, "Don't use fucking charts." And my hypothesis is that somebody in his camp said, dude, he knows his pre-flop ranges way better than you. You don't have to learn them if you both use charts. And DNegs like, I think charts are okay. But to me, I don't think they're okay.
First of all, they're not okay. We can certainly agree on that. I basically think with the Doug DNegs match, by the way, thanks Doug for making me a bunch of money.
Did you bet on Doug?
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, I don't know. DNegs camp probably doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. That's been quite clear from like a number of things that I've seen. So basically, also with the charts, they just got engaged into some complete nonsense debate over charts. And literally, no one cares about charts. Cool. Then also like Daniel started crying when Doug started limping. Personally, that made me very upset for personal reasons.
Why did he start crying when Doug started limping?
He was saying that Doug was only limping because of his lead in the match, and that wasn't sportsmanlike. Okay.
Well, that's.
And I was just like, I just like to limp. I just don't.
Yeah, but even if he's just doing that because of the place in the match, that's fine, right? It's like if you're playing chess and your opponent's low on time and you start playing like defense.
Like random, yeah.
Yeah, you just start just like fucking closing up, so
yes, of course
they end up just dying.
Of course, it's the game. But basically, it's just things like this where
and I remember
it's bad sportsmanlike behavior. Sorry to trash the people who lost a bunch of money to you, but it wasn't a fair match, and like there was one side focusing on starting hand charts and like making excuses, and there was one side just sitting down and playing the game.
And didn't Doug have like 20 people in his camp being like, "Here's how DNegs plays"?
Yeah.
Which that was an unfair match. It
was not fair.
I must say, masterful trolling from Doug over years. I'm not sure it was intentional. In fact, it wasn't intentional. But to get that action heads up was, I mean, kudos.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Yeah. If I could play, if any of the high stakes community could play somebody like Daniel or one of the old school players heads up, I'm sure they would snap on it. But the reason that Doug got to is because he was an asshole on Twitter to Daniel for so long. All right, so let's head towards some Q&A. Guys in the chat,
all right,
give Dom or me, but preferably Dom, your best questions and only interesting questions. I'll be calling out anybody that asks a stupid question.
Nonsense questions get banned.
Yeah, lifetime ban.
Have we not banned anyone around here?
Apparently there's an echo.
I could be because of how we're broadcasting.
Holy moly, the echo. Whoops, my bad.
Someone was trash talking my mic. Wow.
State of poker in 10 years, somebody asks. I'll let you do that and I'll check on the echo.
Good one. Tournaments are going to continue to grow. I personally think we might actually see strong growth in Pod Limit Omaha tournaments as well, because I think those will continue to get more popular. In general, as I just said, tournaments, very optimistic about. Cash games, for a number of reasons, as discussed, absolutely not optimistic about. Perhaps they will continue in like small stakes, weird games with a lot of different blinds and ante structures. Yeah, but RTA is a real concern coming up that we need to deal with. Again, I think people are gonna get way better now because, as always, what's happened is that we've improved our understanding of solvers, we've improved our understanding of learning from these solvers and making the outputs much more easily human teachable. Basically to a point where I hope that no one has a choice but to subscribe to one of my products and just to get better. Yeah, and basically that's what we're going to continue doing. And what I'll continue doing is building more and more better products, making our products better. So I can learn from them and win money, and so I can help people make money.
Awesome. All right, I'm looking for other questions. Will you give Charlie a free copy of DTO?
All he has had to do is ask for all of 3 years or however long. If he ever, I'm still convinced he could learn from it if he wanted to, because he's a smart guy and nothing.
I'd be curious to, I'm open to it. I'm open if you want to throw me a free copy. I'm open to doing it on stream, and obviously giving you some advertising in return and seeing if I can learn things from it. Done. All right. I'm down. Fuck it.
Also about this, by the way, I don't think if you refuse, it seems to me that you're refusing the right kind of. Basically, I'm trying to say that like fuck GTO the way like 99% of people coach it or present it, and not so much fuck GTO if presented in a smart and reasonable way. Yeah,
it's a really nuanced topic, and I definitely went I was firing out of the gates when I first spoke about it. And it's funny, so for years when GTO first came out, I was having these rants to Ben Heath, and we were obviously agreeing with each other. And I was just like, people are so fucking obsessed with blockers and with balancing and all these spots that just, they're playing against Wales in the 100K tournament and they're trying to use a fucking blocker to make their decision. It's like, what is happening in your brain? I'd have these rants for ages, and I finally make a video on it, and then I find out it's this ridiculously nuanced topic that I didn't fully understand, and nobody fully understands the difference, but there's still so much to learn about it. But I still think people are deluded as fuck when it comes to learning.
Oh my god, absolutely. If I think I've made that pretty clear that this is my experience as well. It's just something you learn from, but and it might be you just learn from it, How you learn from this is eventually up to you. If you really look at all that stuff and tell me you can't learn from it, I don't really think so, to be completely honest. I don't.
So another question from a person called Boylock says, what are your main deviations from GTO when facing recreational players? And I guess to kind of to change that slightly is like, what kind of thought process would you have going into a hand versus a whale, for instance, in a 100K tournament? Would you think, okay, I know what my game theory solutions are, and I'm going to increase my bluff percentages by this much because I think he overfolds? Or would you just have a completely different style of approaching the situation?
I like the way you reworded that question.
Thank you.
That's much better already. Right, okay, I can give an example. Okay. If I play against another pro, my thought process is pretty much like, that guy is really good. Oh no, now we need to play properly. And then I just try to play properly, however I get there. Against the recreational, it's completely all over the place. Because I find it honestly quite exhausting sometimes to play against recreationals in specifically on final tables, and less specifically in general. Because when there's someone in there who doesn't act the way you expect them to act, it gets really wild. There's nothing you can do. You can't jump up from your chair and say, what you're doing is not a thing. It doesn't work. You still need to fucking play your card.
You made a check on this flop, idiot.
Exactly,
Solve
right?
this shit.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you then play a final table with these guys, there was like a pretty specific instance was like in Bellagio, there was one instance where like there was one wild player in an ICM scenario that completely blew everything wide open. And I could fill like an entire podcast with why that was difficult. But in general, basically when someone behaves irrationally in ICM, that's madness because it changes everything. So that's exhausting. But if you just play chip EV against an amateur, the first questions be like, like they raise, be like, okay, they do this. You also need to ask yourself, how bad are they? That's always a very important one.
Yeah.
Just how bad are they? And that's always the first thing you ask because that changes everything. If the guy opens 50% of hands UTG, well, congratulations, you're playing against a big whale. So then you do different things. So what I'd say to this is that like you just think, well, this is their range, and you look at your hand. This is my hand against their range. Now we play cards. I think they do X percentage if I do this, or they do this. So I will usually tend to 3-bet more often to get the pots heads up. I will use a smaller 3-bet sizing sometimes I'll use a bigger 3-bet sizing if this is what my read indicates. I have all these snippets of strategy in my head that I know I can do against them. But that's completely different to how I play against a professional. I just take my hand, I try to play it well against their range. And that's the instance when they're really, really bad players. And then when they're sort of okay, it will look a bit closer to like what I employ against a professional.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of different tools in a tool belt, and you have to just intuitively gauge which ones to use in different spots. Yeah. This reminds me of a situation that you and I played in, and it was at the first time we played, I think. It was a Monaco 25K.
I think I know what this hand is.
And just to start at the end of the story, at the final few tables, there was a guy, and it reminded the way that you said it about the Bellagio person, there was a guy that was playing every single pot, every single decision, he was 3x pot post-flop. 3x pot, 3x pot, 3x pot. And he just had all the fucking chips in the world. Somehow was just knocking people out left, right, and center, just annihilating regs. And it was a fucking bloodbath. And we got to the final table. And here's a tool that I think that people could use. I made friends with him. And whenever he and I were in a pot, I'd be like, I was kind of like, I had a big stack as well. I'd be like, check, and he'd be like, check, and I'd be like, check, and I'd be like, I had second pair, I didn't decide to bet because I didn't want to, I was just making friends, and then he'd just be like fucking knocking everyone else out, fucking 3x potting.
That's the thing where I said about like someone acting irrationally in ICM. What the hell are you gonna do?
Yeah, hug him until they stop.
Yeah, make friends with him.
So the hand that you and I played in that tournament, it goes, somebody opens, I remember this hand.
Wait, let me see if I can guess this. Did I fold aces?
Yeah.
Did you have Jack 8 suited? Yeah, okay, that one.
Jack 8 suited, yeah. So somebody opens early position. I flat mid. This is very early on in my poker career. I never
good flat, by the way. Carry on.
Thank you very much. I make a punt call pre.
Not just one, but carry on.
Yeah, there are multiple phone calls. Then there's 2 more flats. You squeeze, I think, big blind.
Yeah, big blind or small blind. It's been a while.
One of the blinds. I think it goes call, fold. Or is it heads up?
I'm pretty sure it was 3-way to the flop.
Yeah, three-way, I think.
Either way, that's punt call number 2.
Yeah, number 2. And I think there's a third punt call in there as well. And I think
the flop.
I think that it comes just like 10, 7, 6 or something stupid like that. You bet, I call, the other guy folds. The turn's like a 6. You bet, I call, and the river's an 8 or something like that. You check, I shove. You actually say to me, and this is the first fucking high stakes tournament I've played, or maybe the second one I've ever played. I'm fucking sitting there with loads of my action, and you say to me, I don't know, you look nervous, but I don't know how you could be bluffing. Which is so funny, because now I'm meant to be like the live read guy, but I was so nervous. And then I ended up showing, and you showed that you folded aces. So yeah, it was one of those spots. I don't mind the reasoning that I had, but it shows how different poker was back then.
Yeah, but how the fuck could you be bluffing there? My God, I still remember this one. Yeah, one of the funnier ones for sure.
Yeah, it was before anyone knew who I was as well. And my thought process there was that I thought that you would think that I was just so boat heavy and so set heavy and straight heavy that you would just end up check folding pretty much any river. But I don't think you were gonna. I think that was a bad assumption. I think I just lucked out on that one.
But you are boat heavy. You can't change that.
Yeah, no, I should be boat heavy for sure. Okay, let's see some other questions.
I think in hindsight, probably that aces fold was. I think I made that a bit too over dramatic. It's probably an easy fold.
Yeah, no, it's super easy. I honestly think that in those spots, given how people played, generally after I call flop, if you could probably just even like check call and then check fold river or something like that against most people.
Yeah, I think now I check the flop. Maybe I check the flops. Three-way pot, I'd probably cry. Say how difficult it is.
Somebody says, and this is the question you could ask to me, the exact same question. Dominik, as a multi-millionaire high-stakes crusher, what made you want to play GUKPT in Luton?
I want more money. No, but I'll give you an answer. Been stuck at home for a while. Kind of miss live poker. I enjoy playing.
Yeah, no, I just exact same.
I just like poker.
I played a GKPT recently, and I was just missing it.
I might come down to London next week, actually. Later.
Yeah, are there any games in London?
Well, there's like a GOKPT now in London next week.
Oh, sick! I might play. Fuck yeah!
I'll let you know if I'm coming down. But what made me play is I just wanted to play. And also, by the way, shout out to this. I found a really good spot there that sells excellent falafel. The best falafel I've had outside of Israel.
Damn, whereabouts is this?
I'm gonna give this was in Luton. Hang on, I'm gonna give this place a shout out because
shout out to Luton falafel.
But the place is called Al-Quds, Alquds. Excellent place.
Say it again.
Al-Quds. Highly recommend if you're ever in Luton too.
All right.
That was fine for like 3 days. I ordered from basically ate the entire menu. That place is excellent. Really, really good. I just wanted to play some cards.
I'm curious. Maybe last question because the chat. Honestly, chat, your questions aren't the best. I'm gonna probably have to get some questions beforehand so we can get some good ones. No offense, but you should be ashamed of yourselves. Maybe last question. So back when I used to play, maybe like 5-6 years ago, some of the people you'd find in the high stakes tournaments, even in the 100Ks, they weren't very good at poker. They I think accumulated the bankroll quite early on when poker was really soft, and they were slowly like trickling it back. But if they were to jump into like 100 and L, they would end up losing because they were just they hadn't really learned how to play poker in such a long time. It was there was this weird dynamic where quite a lot of the quite a lot of the mid stakes crushers online were actually tons better than some of the super high stakes crushers live or people that were playing super high stakes live. Do you think that has kind of sorted itself out over time, or do you think that there are still some people in the super high stakes community that are playing these public events like 100Ks, 250Ks, that if they were to be thrown on 500 Zoom, they'd still end up losing?
First of all, I think they would lose at cash game. Yeah, but that doesn't. I think comparing to cash game is a mistake. I think you could compare to mid stakes tournaments. Now we'd be talking on like an equal footing, I would say. I think for the most part, and there's always going to be one exception or two, and the audience can decide for themselves who I'm trying to talk about here. Little exercise for everyone to figure it out. But I think poker is a game of information. If you are at the top, you have the most resources, you have access to the best information. So with that being said, if you dedicate your time and energy to be at the top of poker and you get the best resources, the guys who are at the top right now, they've been there for a while, and that's because they have all these resources. They spend time, energy, money, whatever to learn all of this. So in that way, it isn't really a fair fight. It's because like the people at the top have better resources. I think for the most part, yes, the super high rollers are substantially better to the lower tier regulars, mostly for that reason alone. Simply, yeah, just. And then obviously there's always going to be one or two people that just run good and stay there.
And the chat is going to have to guess who that is, because we're not the kind of people to name names.
Nice. Right.
Shame. Could have been entertaining, but no.
Yeah.
I think it's
that also applies to online. That also applies to the online high stakes. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap this up. Are there any final shout outs that you want to make for yourself, like where people can find DTO? Is there like a free version that people can use?
Oh, there is a free version.
I knew there was.
Yeah, so you can get it in the App Store, get it on our website, dto.poker. Yeah, there's like some sort of, hang on, actually, it gets Wednesday. Okay, there might be something happening in terms of free, maybe this week still, maybe not. Should follow me or our Instagram, Twitter, whatever. And I heard there might be some free stuff coming this week still. Cool. If not this week, then definitely next week. So if you like free, we're pretty good. Pretty good. We got some
pretty. You like free? You go follow Dominik on Twitter, dude. How do you pronounce your second name?
Nitsche.
Oh, like the philosopher. Okay, cool.
Yeah, easy.
All right, perfect. All right, thanks for coming on, brother.
Awesome. No worries. It's been fun.
Yeah, let's organize me doing a DTO stream. I'm super open to it. I think you've given me a different perspective of the GTO community. You seem to be a lot more fluid in the way that you think, and I really appreciate that, the humility that you brought to the concept as well.
I saved the violence for Twitter and people who deserve it mostly.